As promised, let's talk a little bit about how modeling works in Blender. The workspace itself can already tell us a lot on what modeling entails. As you can see, the object is in edit mode, which is very important for modeling since it relies on manipulating the vertices, edges, and faces of a mesh. You'll also notice that the modeling workspace opens the Quick Tools menu on the left for us already. While in edit mode, the left-hand side Quick Tools menu provides several more tools for us to use, including Extrude Region, Bevel, Knife, and Loop Cut, to name a few important ones. We'll go into more detail about some of these tools in their own videos. The modeling workspace also automatically brings us to the Modifiers tab of our Properties editor. Modifiers are very useful during modeling, and we'll be going over a few of those in their own videos as well. Additionally, there are several more options up here at the top of the viewport now that we're in edit mode. Each of these menus will give you additional operators to work with during modeling. That being said, most basic functions will be available through the Quick Tools menu alone. Just to demonstrate real quick, let's say we want to model a chair. You can do that very easily in the modeling workspace by simply selecting the appropriate tools. I'll be going over exactly how I made this chair as we learn more about the modeling tools. Modeling revolves around the editing of meshes. But what are meshes? A mesh is a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that describe the shape of a 3D object. But then you ask, what are vertices, edges, and faces? Vertices is the plural form of vertex, which represents a single point. Edges are the line segments between vertices. And faces are flat surfaces enclosed by edges, but some software will also call these polygons. You've probably heard the term polygons or polys when people refer to 3D models. If a model is made of polygons, it is a mesh. These are the building blocks of all meshes, and modeling involves the manipulation of these building blocks to create a 3D mesh. So how do we create meshes? Well, we already have our cube here, which is a mesh, but let's try to add another mesh. If we go into the Add menu we had used before to add objects, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different. Because we're in edit mode, Blender only allows us to add mesh shapes. These are the same options that belong to the mesh category in the Object Add menu. Let's go ahead and add a UV sphere. Right now, it's a bit hidden within our cube, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit G to move it outside. As you can see, this UV sphere is made of vertices, edges, and faces, and so it is a mesh. It should be noted, however, that adding meshes in this way will add the mesh shape to the original cube object's mesh data. If you toggle back to object mode, you'll notice that both the sphere and the cube are considered as a single object. If you want to add a separate sphere object, you're going to want to use the Object Add menu instead. You can do this by going into Object Mode in the top left. Then go to the Add menu, go to Mesh, and select UV Sphere from there. We will go into the differences between Object and Edit mode in a separate video. Now that you're able to create meshes, it's time to learn how to start editing them. Object mode is the default mode of Blender and is helpful for manipulating objects as a whole. Objects can be moved around and animated throughout the scene. However, what this object looks like is determined by its mesh data, and mesh data can be edited through Edit mode. Edit mode is the default mode of the modeling workspace, but you can also access it by simply changing this drop-down menu here in the top left-hand corner. For hotkey users, you can press Tab to toggle between Edit and Object mode. While in Edit mode, you will be able to manipulate vertices, edges, and faces to change the shape of your mesh. Once finished, you'll be able to toggle back into Object mode to move the object as a whole once again. It's helpful to know that your Edit mode history and the action of toggling into Edit mode all count as a step in your undo history. Therefore, after you finish an edit and go back into Object mode, undoing your steps will correctly bring you back into Edit mode with all of your Edit mode history intact as well. For example, I'm just going to change this cube into a random shape by selecting one or multiple vertices and using the transformation tools to move, rotate, or scale the vertices around. Then we'll toggle back into Object mode with Tab. Just to top things off, let's rotate our cube to add an action in Object mode as well. Now let's say I changed my mind about something and want to go back in my undo history. Simply hit Ctrl Z to undo, and you'll see that our Edit mode undo history is still intact and accessible. Fun fact, cameras, lights, light probes, empties, images, speakers, and force fields all do not have an Edit mode. But there are non-mesh objects such as armatures, curves, and lattices that do have an Edit mode accessible, but may look a little different. For these objects, you won't be manipulating mesh data, but rather the object-related data that they might have. However, the principles of editing these objects remains the same. Manipulate the building blocks to create what you need. Blender can also edit multiple mesh objects at once. To do this, simply select all the objects you would like to edit and go into Edit mode. You'll notice that you'll be able to manipulate vertices, edges, and faces of any of the objects you have selected simultaneously. However, you won't be able to have any of the objects' mesh data interact with each other, as trying to connect vertices between objects will not work. For example, normally you can press F as in fill to join two vertices with an edge, but because these two vertices belong to separate objects, Blender restricts me from connecting them. In order to actually connect these vertices, I would have to join these two objects into one mesh. To do this, simply select them in Object mode, go to the Object menu, and select Join. For hotkey users, you can simply press Ctrl J. Once you've done this, you can now edit them in Edit mode with no restrictions. In case you want to separate your mesh again into different objects, you can go into Edit mode, select a part of your mesh, go to the Mesh menu, and select Separate. Here you have a few options, but selection is the one you want. This will separate your selected geometry into a new object with its own mesh data.